Hello and welcome to the ILO's World of Work show. I'm Gabrai Brhane. We're coming to you from the ILO headquarters in Geneva, Switzerland via our online platform at live.ilo.org, where you can watch the show with interpretation in French or Spanish. Today we'll be bringing you the latest on some of the key developments in the world of work, including Human Rights Day on the 10th of December, the ILO's 17th Asia-Pacific Regional Meeting currently taking place in Singapore, and the findings of the first ever global survey on experiences of violence and harassment at work. Stay around for all that and more. But first, let's have a quick recap of some of the main events which have taken place at the ILO since our last episode. Last week, we launched our latest global wage report, this time on the impact of inflation and COVID-19 on wages and purchasing power. Our estimates showed that global monthly wages fell by almost 1% in the first half of 2022, the first time this century that real global wage growth has been negative. Data from some 30 countries covering all regions and income groups also show that, on average, employees lost about 6 weeks' worth of wages during 2020-2021. Then the ILO Global Business and Disability Network held its global annual conference, the world's only such event bringing multinational companies together to share best practices on including persons with disabilities into businesses, economies, and communities worldwide. As we like to say, disability inclusion makes good business sense, and this conference proved that once again. The ILO was also present at the 11th UN Forum on Business and Human Rights, where ILO experts took part in panels to share their real-world experiences and knowledge on how to strengthen accountability and support the business community in advancing social justice. More recently, the 13th annual meeting of the ILO's Child Labour Platform took place, which brought together businesses as well as representatives of governments, employers and workers' organizations to share innovative strategies to end child labor in supply chains. We also launched our new Forced Labor Observatory, a global data warehouse on forced labor and trafficking with information from 187 countries on their national responses to tackle this crime. Finally, ILO Director General Gilbert Hongbo held talks in Qatar with senior government officials and migrant workers' representatives on issues including strengthening labor rights and building social justice. Of course, that is a quick snapshot of the many initiatives which the ILO has been involved with over the past month, and you can find more information about them on our website at www.ilo.org. But now let's turn our attention to today's main subject, the link between social protection and human rights. Last week, ILO Director General Gilbert Hongbo sat down with UN High Commissioner for Human Rights Volker Türk to discuss how social protection can support human rights and advance social justice. Let's hear from them now.
We need to keep in mind that when you talk about the social protection, it's not just the redistribution dimension. It's also the initial basic right to what I would call an equal access to opportunities. An equal access to opportunities starting from the beginning of our life on that. And that will determine to what extent you might need or not a solidarity from the national system, which to me is quite important. However, it's important in my mind that to be able to achieve all of that, you need first of all a strong political will. Political will from the authorities that you really want to change that and to break that code and to change the dynamic, which is, I believe, an important dimension.
The future of human rights is going to be decided in finance ministries, because it is precisely the budget analysis that needs to be done. And it's not a question of whether you're a high-income country, middle-income country, or lower-income country. It is a political decision about how much of your GDP are you going to spend on the fundamentals for a society to work. And that's a human rights issue. At the same time, there is also the political leadership that needs to happen in all countries that prioritize a number of issues that are related to development goals, and in particular to social protection issues, because we have seen it not just as a stabilizing factor, but also a fundamental humanitarian, a human solidarity act by everyone else to ensure that people get the type of coverage that they need when they are in distress.
It was truly informative discussion, and I encourage you to watch their full conversation here on live.ilo.org. In a moment, we're going to be joined by Shahra Raza, the director of the ILO Social Protection Department, to go more in depth about this critical issue. But first, what exactly do we mean by universal social protection, and why is it so important? To find out, let's watch this short explainer video.
Social protection is at the heart of living together. It forms the basis of the social contract underpinning our societies. The stronger social protection systems are, the more robust and resilient our societies will be, as the recent pandemic clearly showed. Social security is a human right for everyone, as recognised in the Universal Declaration on Human Rights. And yet, today, half of the world's population still has no access to social protection. States have a duty to act now. Fortunately, they can rely on international social security standards. The ILO Social Protection Floor's recommendation number 202 sets out the strategic vision on how countries can build and maintain universal social protection systems. These should comprise a nationally defined social protection floor that closes coverage gaps and guarantees access to, at least, essential healthcare and basic income security for everyone throughout their lives. Recommendation number 202 also urges countries to achieve higher levels of protection for as many people as possible, as fast as possible, guided by ILO social security standards. In this regard, Convention number 102, that establishes the minimum standard of social security, defines the key elements of social protection systems, as well as minimum levels of protection during our lives. Starting before birth, with maternity protection and child benefits, and stretching all the way to medical care, income security for the sick, for older persons, for people with disabilities, those injured on the job, for dependents in case of death, as well as those who lose their jobs. Convention number 102 remains, to date, the only international treaty that not only sets minimum benchmarks for adequate protection, but also sets fundamental principles of governance and financing underpinning social security systems. The ILO is technically assisting countries to meet the minimum requirements of Convention number 102. As we mark 70 years since the adoption of Convention number 102, and the 10th anniversary of Recommendation number 202, we celebrate two visionary, pioneering and mutually reinforcing international instruments. Both support the development of rights-based universal social protection systems to realise the human right to social security for all.
Welcome back to the ILO World of Work show, where we now are pleased to welcome Shahra Raza, the ILO Director of Social Protection Department. The video we just saw introduced two important conventions, which are both celebrating their anniversaries this year. At the same time, the world is also still recovering from the COVID-19 pandemic, and many other overlapping crises are hitting us hard. That being the case, do you think these international standards remain relevant, especially for Recommendation 202 or Convention 102 that was adopted 70 years ago?
Well, first of all, great to be with you, and you're absolutely right. I mean, I think we need to emphasize that since its foundation, the ILO has really held on to this vision that you can have lasting peace if it's based on social justice. And as we heard the Director General just say, an integral part of social justice is to have social protection. Now, Many of these standards that have been promoted by the ILO have been absolutely necessary steps that have been taken in order to ensure that countries are able to build the kind of rights-based systems that they need in order to ensure the right to social protection to the entire population. Many of these standards, for example, you mentioned Recommendation 202. Let's not forget this was adopted in the aftermath of the global financial crisis. And it was a mechanism to really help countries build universal social protection systems that would provide adequate levels of benefits and adequate coverage to everyone as a right to be in line with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and also the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. The adoption of the recommendation, in its recommendation, there was actually a reference to 19 key principles. And these principles are not just empty words. They're very powerful and effective tools to help countries build systems that, for example, ensure adequate levels of protection and adequate levels of benefits that are sustainable and that are really based on, for example, solidarity in financing them. Similarly with the Convention 102, yes, it was 70 years ago, but to this day it remains the only convention that really provides a very holistic picture of social security systems and sets minimum standards in terms of how social security systems should be built. And to this day, it is a point of reference. And that's why our constituents in 2021, during the ILC, asked the ILO to really accelerate the ratification of this very important convention, which really guides and provides benchmarks and a roadmap for building social security systems. And it's our work to really work with countries that are already interested to increase the number of ratifications to 70 by 2026.
Okay, so great insight. Thank you for the clarification. Let's now try to go even deeper. The Director General mentioned that there was a need to bring human rights framework closer into the work of the multilateralism system. So do you think there is a role to play for the international labor standards developed by the ILO in achieving this?
Well, I think, if there's a silver lining to the COVID crisis is the way in which it has brought attention to the centrality of social protection systems and the need to support countries in building them. And in this regard, given ILO's normative standards and normative role, as well as its expertise in supporting countries build those systems, I think there is today much greater receptivity on the part of other international organizations to work with us. And this is something that we welcome. We welcome the work that we do with, for example, OHCHR, as well as with other UN agencies. Particularly, I can say in the context of the Global Accelerator on Jobs and Social Protection for Just Transitions, we are working very closely with other UN agencies, and the international labour standards that we have, the social security standards, can certainly be the basis and are the basis for the work that we do jointly with them, as well as with countries, with governments and other constituents.
Thank you very much, Shahra, for sharing your insights. You're the ILO Director of the Social Protection Department. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Let's turn now to the ILO's 17th Asia and the Pacific Regional Meeting, which is currently underway in Singapore, and where they too are exploring the role that social protection can play in the region. Over 4 days, it has brought together governments, ministers, representatives of workers and employers organizations, and academics from Asia, the Pacific, and the Arab states to discuss concrete steps to drive a human-centered recovery from the COVID-19 crisis. This meeting comes at an important juncture for the world of work as the region faces multiple challenges, including the continued impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, which has been compounded by the global food, energy, and financial crisis. To share with us some insights of the first day of the conference, we've got with us Steve Needham, the ILO's Regional Communication Lead for Asia and the Pacific. Hi, Steve. Tell us, how has the conference gone so far?
Thanks a lot, Gubre. Great to be with you. As you can see, I'm here at the APRM in Singapore. Things are winding up for the first day, but it's been a really busy day and there's been a lot of ground covered. We started off this morning with both Singapore President Halimah Yacob and our own DG Hungbo, both calling for the need for more inclusive growth. You know, as both these regions begin to recover from the pandemic, it's really vital that everybody benefits from that recovery. We've got a lot of ground to cover. There's a lot of thorny issues to discuss. Not everybody sees these things the same way, so we've definitely got an interesting 4 days ahead of us. Back to you, Gubre.
Thank you, Steve, and here's wishing you and all the team in Singapore lots of success in the days ahead. Let's turn now to our final topic of the show, violence and harassment in the world of work. It is a problem which hits at the heart of human rights and social justice, because we cannot have social justice without freedom from violence and harassment. To draw attention to this crisis, we are in the midst of the 16 Days of Activism Against Gender-Based Violence campaign, which kicks off every 25th November, the International Day for Elimination of Violence Against Women, and runs until 10th of December, Human Rights Day. To tell us more about this issue and offer solutions, we're joined now by Valentina Becchini, a legal specialist on violence, harassment and non-discrimination here at the ILO. Valentina, welcome to the World of Work show.
Thank you. Thanks.
So let me jump right into the issue. What is the current state of violence and harassment around the world, and in particular in the world of work?
Thanks for this question. Where gender-based violence and harassment against women affects nearly 1 in 3 women worldwide. And it has profound negative consequences for survival, but also for their families, their communities, and society as a whole. It prevents women and girls from building their own human capital and to contribute to the economy, but to the society. In the world of work, violence against women undermines both the right to equality and non-discrimination and the right to safe and healthy working environments, 2 out of 5 fundamental principal rights at work. It creates significant health, economic and career costs for the victims. It impairs productivity, and it has a huge cost for governments in terms of health services, justice, support services. But what is peculiar of violence and harassment against women in the world of work, it's that it exacerbates existing gender gaps that women face, including, for instance, the pay gap, the women low participation rates in the labor market, or occupational segregation. So really, violence and harassment against women in the world of work contribute to the unequal status of women in the world of work and in the society.
Now, the ILO, together with Lloyd Register Foundation and Gallup, released last week the findings of the first global survey on experiences of violence and harassment at work. What were the main findings?
Yes, yeah. We just launched this new joint report, which sheds light on the magnitude of violence and harassment at work, and also on issues related to disclosing such experiences. According to this new data, in 2021, more than 1 in 5 people in employment experienced at least one form of violence and harassment. Psychological violence and harassment was the most prevalent, okay? And overall, women were more affected than men, although to not a greater differences. Physical violence and harassment was 1 in 10, okay, and 1 in 15 for sexual violence and harassment. But what is interesting is that while men were among the most at risk of physical violence and harassment, women were almost twice as likely to be exposed to sexual violence and harassment. The findings of this survey also show that the risk of violence and harassment is not equal for all groups of people in the world of work. So there are some groups that are more exposed, and we have youth, for example, migrants, or wage and salaried workers. And the survey shows that young women were almost twice as likely as young men to be exposed to sexual violence and harassment, for instance. The survey also shows that talking about violence and harassment at work is unfortunately still a taboo, still difficult, and only half of the victims shared their experience with someone. And it's sad to say that, you know, this survey shows that waste of time, but fear for their own reputation were among the most common barriers preventing people from disclosing. So there's a lot to do.
Yeah. So facing this worrying situation that you just described, so what is the solution? What is the ILO calling for to help end violence and harassment in the workplace?
Yeah. Well, the ILO is urging member states to ratify and implement the new Convention 190 on violence and harassment, which was adopted in 2019 and has been so far ratified by 23 countries around the world. So the convention really provides a compass to prevent and eradicate violence and harassment at work. Not only because it recognized for the first time the right to be free from violence and harassment in the world of work, but also provide concrete measures and a clear framework for governments, employers and workers' representatives to build this world of work free from violence and harassment. So really the ILO is urging everyone to push their own governments to ratify Convention 190. It's also calling to collect more data. We really need more data on violence and harassment at work, disaggregated not only by sex, but by personal characteristics. We need to strengthen prevention measures because violence and harassment against women, against men, against everybody can be prevented. This is really important. We need more awareness raising on violence and harassment because too many people do not realize that what they're facing is not normal. Mm. And we need more support services and enhance access to justice in case that this scourge happens.
Valentina, as you just mentioned, we are currently campaigning to get all 187 members states of the ILO to ratify and implement ILO Convention 190. As part of this campaign, we have produced a series together with your department as short videos to draw attention to violence and harassment in the world of work, and we'd like to share one of them with you today. You can find many more videos like this one online on our many social media platform, and I encourage you to watch and share them with your friends, with your family, with your colleagues, and call for your countries to ratify the Convention 190 to help end violence and harassment once and for all. Now, that's all we have time for in this episode of the World of Work show. Remember, if you want to see any of the shows again, you will find them all on live.ilo.org, along with many other videos. So thanks for watching. For me, Gabriel Brahana, and the rest of our team, goodbye for now and see you again next year.